So, colleagues, this is now the exciting part. So, today we're pleased to welcome Dr. Adam Pantanowitz, a very special guest from the University of the Witwatersrand. His background is outlined in our programs, but I'd like to highlight a few areas. His background is in biomedical and electrical engineering. He is well known for initiating and leading the first group in the world to connect a human brain live and mobile to the internet in a project called Brainternet. He enjoys using applied science skills to have real world impact. He's lectured in a number of disciplines, especially engineering and medicine at the University of the Witwatersrand. Currently, he holds the Angela and Davis Fine Chair in Innovation and is the director of the WITS Innovation Center. Today, Adam will be talking to us on wielding modern magic. Please help me welcome Dr. Adam Pantanowitz.
The music is appreciated, thank you. The walk was very short. Thank you very much for having me. Good morning, everybody. And thank you, Lindiwe, for the very warm welcome. It strikes me that during this welcome address this morning, that just how much we are augmented human beings. We are hybrid human beings. We are not just our own neural networks anymore. And we are a combination of a connected person. These devices that we have are mind extenders. They connect us up to networks and we access information differently from ever before. I think that's so pertinent in this conversation today. So I'm going to be speaking to you about this topic of wielding modern magic. And I want to start off with this perhaps overused but rightly so quote by Arthur C. Clarke, that any technology that's advanced enough is somewhat indistinguishable from magic. Now, just like that welcome address showed us, we never thought many years ago that we'd be able to speak through our watches to people on the other side of the world. That seemed like magic. That seemed totally elusive to us. And the accessibility that technology brings about the ability for us to connect to each other in remarkable new ways. This is really something fascinating about our modern times. And what's more fascinating is the way that it is more and more rapidly changing as we go. Today I'll speak to you about some of the modern magic that I have managed to wield with my teams and collaborators to create new things in the world, and hopefully we'll get some ideas and philosophies from that. So just a little story I'd like to share with you. The year is 2008 and I was just finishing up my undergraduate in engineering. And this is what Facebook looked like at the time. So technology has come a long way, certainly since then. And we thought to ourselves, well, we wanted to create an impact in surgery environments. We heard that surgeons have a very hard time manipulating surgery lights, that in doing so, their hands are busy, they usually aren't clean and sterile, and they don't want to keep moving the light around to exactly where they need the light for surgery. So as I was graduating fourth year, turns out that these things came around. Does anyone recognize these? Anyone ever played Wii Tennis? Nintendo Wii Remote was a gaming console that came out around that time, and it came with this very low-cost device, which has an infrared camera built into the front, and that's how it's able to figure out where you're pointing your remote when you're playing a game like, not Wii Tennis, but another Wii game, I can't remember them. This was a very low-cost device. So we took this device and we created something called SurgeWii. And you can see that these stupid names are a trend with me. Forgive me. In time, you will learn my sense of humor. But SurgeWii was born. It was the application of this device to the surgical environment. And so this began not just the naming convention, but the thought that we could use existing off-the-shelf tools to create new things. So how were we going to move the surgery light? Well, I don't know if you've been to the arcade and you've ever played one of these. Probably many more of us have than we have played Wii tennis. At the arcade, these have a two-dimensional motor axis that is used to then deploy to collect the teddy bear. We went to the Magic Company, somewhere nearby here actually, and they had a huge warehouse. And in that warehouse were all of these machines after they had reached the end of life. It was a warehouse of broken dreams. And the Magic Company really did give us this huge opportunity to be able to take one of their old pieces of equipment. And we used it to set up this two-dimensional, now you'll see a much earlier version of myself, a two-dimensional system that was now tracking the surgeon's hand using infrared light and allowing the surgeon to remotely control a computer as an added feature because we reflected infrared light around the room. Can you believe it? We reflected infrared light around the room and we were able to then control a computer. We could wirelessly and remotely control images and manipulate them. There you see no mouse attached, literally no strings attached. This Minority Report style computer interface was in 2008 when, nowadays this technology seems ubiquitous and commonplace. But if you rewind your mind back to those times when perhaps change and disruption wasn't so commonplace, this was something that we realized that we can have an influence. We can make a plan. We can get a donation from the Magic Company. We can use an off-the-shelf piece of technology and repurpose it for a different use. And it brought about these ideas of the ability to deconstruct and reconstruct things, to change their form. And I started some projects to focus on trying to assist disabled people, in particular, to try to uplift and make the lives of disabled people better. A project like this, where we took a donated wheelchair and for a couple of hundreds of rands, we were able to assemble some off-the-shelf electronics to drive the wheelchair using only eye movement. So for a quadriplegic person to have this type of technology is totally game-changing. And in South Africa, we often can't afford to import the latest state-of-the-art technology, and so retrofitting what we have is sometimes a good strategy. And we are in constrained environments. We've been hearing about the constraints just this morning in our environments from the chair's welcome. But sometimes frugality is a feature and not a bug. Because it turns out that if we can find creative ways to work around these environments, then we're able to navigate them and find a way through. We do live in constrained environments, and it seems increasingly so, despite the proliferation of technology and the huge leverage that technology is bringing us. It is turning out that it is just concentrating the resource in a certain place. And that isn't desirable for our society. We need to find better ways of working together. But while we're going through this transition, which I believe to be a transition, we have to work with the environment in which we are. And constraints sometimes pull something out of us. So I'll share a little story with you. This is Graham Payton. He is controlling this robotic arm using his brain, using his thoughts. And the way that he's doing it is at the beginning of the video, he looked at a flashing light. And that flashing light detected, an EEG device, which is attached to the back of his head, detects that he's looking at light and turns the robotic arm on. If he looks again at that light, it turns the robotic arm off. The idea here is that disabled people in the environment can look at different flashing lights to control their environment. So here, Graham's controlling a robotic arm by mapping his facial expressions to the movement of that arm. You'll forgive me that the video is very low quality because it was created a long, long time ago, right? But the story goes that we went to a biomedical engineering conference in Germany, in Berlin, around the same time, and we told them that we were working on this little project, and it cost us 1,000 rand. They said, no, that sounds just like our project, which cost us 1 million euros. And this is a true story. Sure, ours doesn't have all the bells and whistles. We used a little toy robot, but this is a true story that in Berlin, the European Union, we're working on a robotic arm that would be controlled remotely by the human brain wirelessly, as is this one. We used a toy EEG, basically. It's off-the-shelf EEG called the Emotive Epoch, and a little kit robotic arm and some computers that we had in the lab to create this possibility. So how is all this happening? So take a look at this video. This is Kim. Kim is here controlling his computer cursor using his eye position. So you know, if you're unable to click or you don't want to click, then it might be more optimal for you to just move your head around as it naturally does and track the position of the cursor. We published this work because we think it's a new way of tracking. We did find a prior patent thanks to the library services at our university. And there you saw Kim playing Counter-Strike without a mouse. So the accessibility possibilities are extreme. We used a cricket helmet in that example, and so it goes. You know, there are many examples of this where we repurpose these types of things to do stuff. And I think this is largely because of Moore's law. You may not yet be familiar with Moore's law, but I'm going to give you a brief overview of what it says to us. It says that every 18 months, our ability to perform computation is doubling at the same price point. That's critical. Because if you think about the implications of that, and you don't hold the price point constant, you actually realize that accessibility is exponentially increasing. In other words, there's a huge democratization going on here for our society and our species in access to compute. So it's not just doubling every 18 months, but the price is halving. This is very exciting. This trend has been going on for a long time. It's disputed what happens around the 2020s, but I can tell you that, certainly in my view, we've now abstracted away from the hardware layer and we're going faster than exponential in many respects. So it depends on how you argue this, but this definitely has held true for a very long time. We mentioned in the intro, and thank you again for the warm welcome, this Brain Internet project where we were able to connect the human brain up to the internet in real time. And this is Danielle. She was the first woman to stream her neurological system with her partner Gemma in the project onto the internet in real time. I think what really was fascinating about this is we started to, once we had that live stream, build AI layers on top of the live stream so we could determine when, for instance, they were making a movement or walking, and could classify using AI based on their brain signals what they were up to in the moment. So here you see Danielle demonstrating that she's moving her arm and the internet recognizes that she's moved, no strings attached. So this was about 2016, 2017, and it made a big media splash because I think people realized that, hey, this little group in South Africa has done this at very low cost. Whoa. Put the brakes on here, guys. This is exciting, but it's also very scary, and that creates a lot of volatility in information spread. As you know, you are orchestrators of information, many of you, and so you understand the spread of information under these conditions. So the world woke up to this idea, in my humble view, that these things are possible, and they're coming. And my intention in doing it was sort of an art project to show that these things are readily possible now, and we need to have a conversation, guys, about what potential futures we as a species wish to build. So on brain technology, I'd like to share an interview that I did with you, and I'm going to share this brief clip from this interview. At the time of the pandemic, we found ourselves all a little, I think, downtrodden. Many of us were depressed, many people were locked at home, and there was a lot of chaos in our lives for a number of reasons. I'm not going to recount many of them, but I started this interview series with people who had been through great adversity, and yet found a way to triumph. It was almost that the adversity had forged them in their lives. From the adversity, they created something magical. So I'll share a couple of clips with you of these people, and the way that this connects to brain technology should be fairly obvious very soon. So here's a clip.
Start off by telling me a little bit about why you joke that you're one of the only people who can be turned on by remote control.
Yeah. And as if by magic, I do actually have my remote control here in front of me now, which I can show to the audience. And I shall switch it on now. That is the device. It looks a bit like a mobile phone. But really with this is the difference between me being able to talk and move and not. So basically I have a brain pacemaker, if you like. When the settings were first redone, they weren't the correct settings, and I realized quite how bad my condition has progressed because I really couldn't move. I could still just about smile, but it was seriously worrying. But this is my lifeline, and literally you could turn me off completely. I mean, I'm so delighted to have it, but yeah, it was a difficult journey having the operation and what have you, but yeah, still smiling.
Change, this disruption that we seek has many noble pursuits. And this is Matt Eagles. Matt is, I'm fortunate to say, a friend. He's a daredevil with Parkinson's disease in his, I think, 70s now. He does wing walks. I saw him on, literally yesterday, shared a social media video. He was axe throwing. I thought, Matt, what are you doing axe throwing? So he is a very interesting character. He's kind of a brawler character. But what does he do with this superpower that this device has imbued? He goes out every day, he wakes up, you heard him say he can't get out of bed unless his device is activated. And he uses this device to advocate for patients' rights in the UK. So the very thing he's enabled to do, he advocates for. It's in this magical story. This is an extraordinary individual. And having this opportunity to talk to him about his motivations, you realize that he's not in a patient role. He is advocating for patients at health conferences, to drug companies, to try to make and bring about the change that has enabled him. It's very beautiful. At Wits, we love this idea of using the brain, and here you can see Sikolele, who's about to look at a flashing light, and when he looks at this flashing light, we're passing information through his brain, detecting it using the electroencephalogram, the wireless EEG, the same toy I mentioned earlier, and we're transmitting it, whatever's on the light, whatever information exists, to a second computer. So what we actually are doing is we're connecting up two disconnected computers entirely through the brain, as a network. And this work was, again, very cheap, very easy for us to do, used off-the-shelf technology and two disconnected laptops to send words like Apple and hello. And it's a few years old now, but it was on carte blanche at the time because, well, the reason that we do this isn't quite apparent to me yet. But what it does do is it enables us to study the transfer rates of information through the brain so that, again, disabled people can better control their environments. And that's really the motivation. And you see, we go in incremental steps. So actually, these guys had transmitted words, and a few years prior, these guys had transmitted, sorry, the other way around. So these guys had transmitted words, and the guys prior, who I showed you, had transmitted numbers through the brain. So two different projects with the intention, ultimately, that we were going to pass a tweet through the human brain, but we never got to that because the transfer rates were really low. But you get the idea that we can do radical things involving humans and computers using what we have around us. And we used this work to then go and create what is a model of the human brain. We took an AI model, we trained the model on EEG data, electroencephalogram data, again from the visual cortex of the brain, to train a model to say, well, how would a computer behave in the same way as a human brain? So we took and created a symmetry between the computer and the human. Now we expose that computer to the same type of flashing light that a human would see. And in doing so, the computer now produces biological signals as though it is experiencing that flashing light like a human. So this is where we've gotten to. But being in this room today fundamentally strikes me that all of these things that we did, we stood on the shoulders of giants, and all of these things that we have done have been a result of our access and ability to get information. The Nintendo Wii Remote project was from a small side project that someone in California was working on. He had figured out how to reflect infrared light to control a computer mouse. So we took that and put it in a surgery environment. Access to information cannot be overstated in terms of its importance. It is paramount for any society to drive forward in this modern information age. And in the absence of it, I believe that not only would our society be different, but my career would be radically different. I wouldn't be able to be speaking to you today as someone who's been working in research and have anything meaningful to say. Without access to fast, immediate information, we are lost. So here's our brain system producing brain signals similar to the human brain, but from a computer. So why is that interesting? Well, let's consider this and try to connect these dots, as we often do in the world of innovation. In connecting these dots together, well, if we can use a computer to create information relating to humans, it suddenly changes healthcare. One of the reasons it does so is not just that we can study the brain using a brain model instead of studying the human, but because what we can now do, what is the opportunity that's created, is we can leverage this data into new applications, into new ideas. You see, it's like innovation. It creates this new opportunity for all new algorithms to be trained without ethics approval, without the costs of data collection. And in particular in medicine, if you know someone who has a rare disease, you will know that while we have this abundance of data around us, there are not many examples of this given condition. And so if you look at the search space, we're flooded with information, but it's not always useful data. We are flooded with complex information, but if you search through the potential realm of all patients, of all possible conditions, it actually just turns out that sometimes there are just 1,000 examples in the whole world. And of those 1,000 examples, you might be able to meet 100 of them. And of those 100, only 10 of them might be willing to participate in a study. And the costs to get that information are immense. So if we can leverage simulation and leverage data augmentation and data generation, for this purpose, this becomes an extraordinarily exciting thing for the world of medicine. I want to turn our attention a little bit to connecting the dots in another direction. This is the automated CPR system that we created through a small wearable on the arm. We were able to assist someone to perform in real time better CPR, and also for CPR training, the ability to know when you're performing good or bad CPR. Again, another cheap device off the shelf. Managed to publish it in partnership with our library. So in emergency services, it's a different type of healthcare scenario. We often have these life-threatening scenarios, and people often forget their motor training. So this type of system could guide a person during a CPR event, if they're ever in that situation. But more commonly, we call out for help. So a few years ago, I was very fortunate to be a co-founder of this business. This business is called Aura, and what it does is it dispatches security and medical response to people wherever they are around the country and now in a number of places around the world. We've assembled a network of, we believe it's the biggest response network in the world, apart from public service. What it really does is it gets you the nearest responder to your location, and it does so through smart technology. So as you hit a panic button, a button in an app, a circuit is broken, any Internet of Things or IoT device can trigger a panic into our network, and then we immediately dispatch the nearest responder. They're already on their way, while we have the moment to call you and have that lossy conversation with you. You know the one? Hello, I need help. Okay, where are you? I'm in Kempton Park. Did you say Melrose Arch? No, Kempton Park, Kempton Park. You know, that's a lossy conversation that in a life-threatening situation, when time is critical, we don't want any of that to be the case. So what we do is we call you after the dispatch is done. It's already on the way. And we say, are you okay? And if you are okay, genuinely, then we retract it. And those few minutes can be critical. So in this business, our core metric, you know, it's not revenue, it's not how many responders we have. Our core metric is how many lives have we saved. And the count is on about 2,350 lives so far. And that's worth getting up for. You know, that's a pursuit that's worth growing. That's what is really exciting. It's South Africa's answer to 911. Again, built locally, using tools we have and information we can access. And then there's this, about bringing about the science and technology revolution, but for kids. Introducing kids when they're young to these potential technologies. So I want to share with you that we were seeing an increasing gap in the ability for people to cope with our curriculum in engineering coming out of school, and we felt concerned about this. We didn't know how to address it. It's beyond the scope of our work at university. And then I met these two young entrepreneurs who were creating this business, Resolute, and they were doing it part-time. They just had built a few kits, you know, on the side, and they loved technology and they loved teaching. And so what they did is they did something very fascinating. They created a little home automation kit and a little smart garden. These two prototype kits. And immediately I was like absolutely astounded by this business potential. And we launched Resolute just before COVID. I'm sharing maybe a bit more than I'd intended on the story, but imagine this. So now we've got this startup. We just launched. These two young entrepreneurs are going full time. They hired 1 or 2 people, very excited. Schools are closed. What are we going to do? How can you sell to customers who are closed? How are we going to get this product out? How are we going to change the world, right? And so we wrote it out. We did what we could to make sure that we looked after people while minimizing our costs, while trying to create a sustainable potential future for this business. And I'm pleased to say that, you know, it did grow up after this terrible COVID nightmare where we were locked down to a business that now has 250 schools in South Africa so far and is growing and democratizing access, in our belief, to these technologies which are sometimes out of reach, so that kids can create little line-following cars and program them from their devices, really get access to science and technology, hopefully creating innovators of the future who are going to come and change our world. Now, I've been reflecting a lot on this idea of how innovation happens, because in my new role at Wits University, where we're heading up this innovation idea, and for the university, we want to see much more innovation come out of the space, and we want lots of people to create startups, to engage with industry, to generate change for society. Not for business's purpose, but for change in society's purpose. We've got extraordinary researchers, very talented people who are making change. And I found that innovation, in my opinion, is permissionless. If you're asking for permission to make a change, you're going to encounter that immune system that we all face when we try to make a change. If you're in a business, if you're in a university and you're trying to do something a little bit differently, watch how quickly little immune system ideas come and gobble it up, and it disappears. So innovation happens a little bit on the side where we're able to go and test something, play, prototype, make something happen, and do without necessarily asking for permission to do. And I found 2 spaces where this actually exists in society, and we're very fortunate. Many of us work in universities. That's one of the spaces. The other is entrepreneurship, startups. That's the other place where it exists in society, and together those 2 can be a vehicle, a vector for societal change. So I want to share with you a couple more brief stories. This is what a traditional medical study looks like. You have a person whose face is removed, and you might be studying something like, can we use this photo with a remarkably small data set to understand what this person's body mass index or BMI is. And so it turns out that if we take a small set of people and we look at their silhouettes, we can quite well determine what their body mass index is. We can do this quite well using photographs. If we turn the photos into silhouettes, we lose a lot of the information and complexity of the photo, and we're able to then build a system to predict body mass index. But if you have a very small set like the one I described in medicine earlier, then you may want to think a little bit out the box. So what we did is we took a single photo of a person and we manipulated the aspect ratio. Now, I don't know if you've ever seen your university or business's logo or a photo of yourself where someone's dragged it without maintaining, constraining the aspect ratio. It looks really off and immediately jars you. So this is a different approach. So we're actually exploiting the change in the aspect ratio so we can generate a whole lot more data. And we were able to train this novel machine learning tool with just 7 examples of photos, which is great for us because that creates the opportunity to use the rest of the data to actually test whether our system is valid. And using photographs is quite fascinating. So this person, I've been speaking a little bit about the pandemic. You may recall we all wore face masks, yes? And some of us wore face masks properly and some of us improperly. So we couldn't get out the door to go and get data. We couldn't go and measure people's faces on how they were wearing masks because we wanted to create a system to give a person gentle feedback about how their mask was being worn in contexts like a hospital or a shop, because we were seeing these fights break out between security and individuals wearing their masks, or between people in shops. So we thought maybe we can take that out of everyone's hands and just give them a little bit of social feedback and see how they react, and maybe this will help. Anyway, we couldn't go out and measure these people, so we leveraged data that doesn't exist, because this lady actually doesn't exist. This is a computer-generated person and face, and this used to be very impactful a few years ago, but now everyone's used to AI generating all sorts of things. But I'll tell you that we used machine learning to detect the position of the face, artificially masked the person, and then trained our machine learning algorithm to, using a small off-the-shelf computer called the Raspberry Pi, be able to detect in real time whether or not Philippe is wearing his mask correctly and give that social feedback to him. Now, we can debate whether or not masks were effective, and I don't think we should go there today. However, I do think that these types of technologies are exciting because this project really shows me this is tech creating tech. We used artificial data, we used machine learning to mask the artificial data, and then we trained a system that had never been illuminated by the face of a human being to perform a function. This is very interesting and freeing in some ways. And I would never be able to share data with you of patients, of course, because that would be totally unethical. But what happens if we replaced all of their faces? Could this humanize us in medical education as patients, as people? Could doctors become more empathetic? Those questions which ring to mind. And since we can generate data, can we generate X-rays? This is what we did recently. We generated X-rays through Brad Siegel's masters and published this. And what we were able to do is select a pathology like emphysema or pneumonia and imbue it into the X-ray to create a totally new data set that originates not from human beings, which can now be used to go and train ethically new algorithms. There are complexities here we need to navigate and talk about, but it creates new opportunities and new potentials in medicine, and we are really at a huge inflection point. I think we all feel it now. We're seeing it with AI online. We're seeing it when our presentations are hybrid in the morning, when we are using these tools in our daily lives. I want to share another ShiftStream video with you briefly.
Well, basically, I do a lot wearing bionicomms, and this is because when I was younger, I contracted a disease called meningococcal septicemia strain B. It's a big mouthful, but it's basically a absolutely fatal disease, and I was 15 months old when I caught it, so I was told that I was like 100% going to die by doctors. There was no chance of me being so small at the time, and as well battling such an awful disease that is so deadly as it is. I was basically given 0% chance of survival, to the point where my parents were basically asked when the doctors would shut my body down for the machines to keep me stable. My family were asked if they wanted to come in and see me before I shut my eyes, because they couldn't be certain that they would ever open again. So I was pretty much like on death's door. Like, I was told I was going to die, but obviously I'm here today. I survived, and it was after 1 week in intensive care, 3 weeks in recovery, a secondary infection, and 10 blood transfusions. So they did have to go, but I'm so incredibly lucky to be alive, having only lost my hands at the wrist and now wearing these awesome bionic arms, which I think are kind of better than human hands. It's not been like too bad for me.
So Tilly Lockie over here is an influencer online. She does makeup artistry using her robotic arms, and she's an advocate for the technology. She actually goes out and works with her arm, and then she gives feedback to Open Bionics, the company building her arms. She's a brand ambassador for them now, and she's an influencer in the UK and TV presenter, a lovely person with a great family who has embraced the disability to the point that she says she's better than human. Now, sometimes in these talks, I show something called the uncanny valley, and I didn't show it today, but if you look at the old versions of the uncanny valley hypothesis, if you're interested in this, you can go check it out. You'll see that prosthetic arms are one of the things that used to be uncanny and cause a human reaction of concern or revulsion or dislike. It was a study on how things are changing. Tilly can embrace this opportunity to use her arms, which are superhuman. You see, our pursuit is that disability can be eradicated from society. Now, what would life be without immense challenge? It's a question I wonder myself. If we were to create this utopian society, leveraging tech in the right way to create futures that are totally astounding for people, would disability just fade away? What would it do to our species if we had no adversity, no struggle, no difficulty? What purpose would we have? These are questions I wonder about, and I think there are always these tough bits in life, right? Sometimes we think about our future with trepidation. Technology is coming and it's, but like Melvin Kranzberg said famously, technology is neither good nor bad, nor is it neutral. We get to choose how we use technology and how we wield this magic to imbue it into society, or imbue society with this magic. We get to choose, and adversity actually takes us there. If you look through history, these times of struggle have changed the course of our species. So coupling adversity with people creates change. Strife creates great art.
I promise this is not the latest Apple Watch. I have lost my voice due to Lou Gehrig's disease, and I am using a self-built speech-generating device to communicate. As Henry David Thoreau said, the mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation and go to the grave with the song still in them. No truer words have been spoken, especially for individuals with no voice, because I feel their pain. I have been building speech-generating devices for personal use for several years. I realized that true happiness is a byproduct, and it comes in massive, unlimited, infinite quantities when we pursue a just and meaningful cause. I decided to go find a massively transformative purpose. My dream is to positively impact over 1 billion souls on this planet.
Godfrey, my friend Godfrey over here, is a keynote speaker. He has no voice. We created the sign language tech to try to blur and dissolve the boundary between people who can and can't speak sign language. For Godfrey, the ultimate holy grail would be one of these pieces of technology to be able to recreate his voice, perhaps in the way he remembers it. I was asked to do an interview just this morning about, which I haven't yet done because it's rescheduled, but about, do we own our voice? It's an interesting question. Certainly we identify with our voice, and being able to give people their voice back could be amazing. So in all of this, I think there is some magic word to all of this, and that is why. Why do we do things? Why are we in a certain situation? Why is the world assembled by us the way that it is? We imprint ourselves into this world. The technology we see is not discordant. There's no discontinuity between it and us, as we saw this morning. So elegantly demonstrated. We are a part of it. It is a part of us. And like a bird's nest that you see out in nature, that's assembled by some birds. It's not discordant from nature because we're so used to it, but we don't go nature, nature, nature. Not nature, 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 nature. We actually realize it is part of nature. And similarly, these tech tools should really become, in my opinion, understood to be part of nature and part of us, because our thoughts lead to actions, and our actions can lead to giant leaps. If we think big in our thinking and we act small with incremental steps, this can lead to great change. So let's go make great things. Just want to thank you very, very much. These are some collaborators and contributions and image credits, and my thanks to you all. Thank you very much. Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you. Do you want to do Q&A now? Thank you.
On the couch.
Wow, thank you very much. That was such an amazing start to the conference. Thank you for okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, Adam, for sharing these life-changing stories with us. And the work that you do is so meaningful. Thank you very much. So, colleagues, can I just ask that we take one or two burning questions for Adam before we move on to the next session? Any comments or questions?
Thank you, Chair. Oh my God, Alan, really, I'm just blown away by your story. But thank you very much for that. My question is really around uh, the change that you have made and the impact. And so you did say technology is neither good nor bad, but neutral. And you mentioned something about how do we engage the repulsive immune mind. And so I want to ask you, how do we change our brain?
It's an interesting question, and thank you very much. I think there are many, many ways and thoughts that come to mind to answer the question. But I would start by saying that, you know, when I say tech, well, after Melvin Kranzberg, who said tech is neither good nor bad, nor is it neutral, it's because we can choose the potential use of a technology. And we as a society can shape that change, even though we sometimes feel like we are participants. We feel like bystanders, passengers, but we are actually participants. We are bringing about this change through our use of technology, through our creation of technology. And I think that change begins with little small pockets, little small teams experimenting, making something happen, and then testing it, prototyping it out in society. That's how change begins, through technology, certainly. And I think that, in general, we do need to do some work to change our minds and our thinking. And I think a lot about this. You know, there's this wonderful tool of meditation, which can help us embrace uncertainty and change, because we're living in a world where things are changing. And if you extrapolate Moore's law, it's going to be changing at a rate that is faster than the rate we feel now, tomorrow. But that will be the slowest it will ever go. Right? So we are in unprecedented, uncharted times, and that is very unsettling. So I think we need to protect ourselves and do a lot of work so that we can not only cope with that change, but integrate it meaningfully and become the very best because of it. I had many, many thoughts about how we can use technology to change our brains, but I'm not going to go down that path for now. We worked on stuff like that, not mind control. It's more to choose a target state in your brain. Like, let's say I want to work now. I want to be in a certain brain state for that. Then we can create and bring about the changes for your brain for that. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Adam. I think there's a question online.
Yes, I saw the question online. It's basically, will we be impacted by sitting? So will we be physically limited, for instance, so will human involvement in physical tasks in the future be limited to sitting behind a computer screen or sitting in an armchair with a brain implant and manipulating a distant robot system? I want to say that human physical tasks will be limited if we just sit in armchairs. We won't be able to go about doing very much then, because our muscles need to move and we will otherwise atrophy. So that's the one thing. That's not the question. The question is, these are called surrogates. Will we be able to sort of puppet remote versions of ourselves in the physical world to go out and achieve things? So it's been speculated in science fiction, and as you've seen, science fiction often creates reality. Spywatch, right? Yeah. Available through our great insurers in the country. So I guess your question really is an interesting one, and I imagine that if we create a future where these remote surrogates are possible, who we can beam into, we probably won't be wanting to play in this three-dimensional world in which we currently exist. If we have the technology to be able to do that, it's probable that all of the labor and things that we need will be taken care of by autonomous machines, and so we won't want to be one of those machines. They will do better than us at their function, and so this is a technological possibility of having surrogates, but it's an improbable potential future, in my opinion, because I think we'd rather be piloting spaceships in distant galaxies or teleporting ourselves to a dream world that is of our own making, generated in real time through our own thoughts. And if only we could keep the power on, we would be able to do that. I'm sure the generator is going to kick on in a minute. Can you still hear us in the meantime, if we can continue? Yeah? So I guess what I was saying there is that we would probably want to not beam ourselves onto this terrestrial plane, right? We would want to do exciting things like generating 3D worlds from our own minds, which is possible. So I don't see surrogacy, while it is a possible future, I don't see it as a likely future, because there are so many ways to abstract from the physical when you're in that plane. I'm very mindful that we've probably lost the live feed as well, and that I'm answering the question of someone who asked, but they are not aware of it.
Yeah.
But perhaps they're here as a surrogate. And then they can, yeah.
Yeah. So, colleagues, I'd like to say thank you very much to Adam once more. I think he's given us a lot to think about, a lot to consider, how we forge our futures in this profession. So thanks once again, Adam.
Thank you very much. Enjoy the conference hall. Good luck. Thank you.